guys, we've got an exciting review today because we're talking about You Season 4 Part 1. Netflix back at it again, splitting up seasons of their series, but at least we don't gotta wait too long for Part 2 because it comes out next month. But as excited as I was to get into Season 4 of You, I was a little bit cautious going into this because as much as I have enjoyed every single season of this show, I wasn't sure what we would do post the death of Love, because Love was such a phenomenal addition to this series, particularly in the last season, so I wasn't sure how the show would adjust to that change. Thankfully though, Season 4 Part 1 of You really doesn't miss a beat when it comes to the quality of its story and its characters. Just to let you guys know, the majority of the video is a spoiler-free review, but I'm going to talk some spoilers towards the very end just because the review embargo does lift as the episodes drop on Netflix, but I'll give you guys a full warning before I talk any spoilers. Part 1 of Season 4 entrenches Joe in yet another thrilling chapter, now set in London with a new identity, with some even bigger twists and turns than we've come to expect from the show. It's quite impressive and a testament to the show's writing how the show is able to continuously evolve, change up the formula, and keep things so fresh each and every season. Season 4 heavily embraces the murder mystery genre, which is a format that I think works perfectly for this type of show. It embraces all the great things about the murder mystery genre, while also making fun of some of the tropes that we know that come along with it. As we come to find out that Joe is not the biggest fan of the murder mystery genre. You really gotta feel for Joe, at least somewhat at this point. He finally has this new life, he's in a new country working as a professor at a university. You think he's finally free, but yet the man always finds a way to get plunged right back into the drama, now being thrusted into this killer running around, the Eat the Rich killer, killing all these spoiled rich people around Joe, one by one as the season progresses. This aspect to Season 4, though, I think is one of this season's biggest strengths because we're flipping Joe's role completely on its head. For so many seasons now, we've seen Joe be the one in control of every situation, plotting and stalking various people, but this season, he is the one that's being stalked. Someone is toying with him, sending him messages about how they know all his secrets, and Joe is absolutely not a fan of being on the defense and being on guard all throughout the season. All these elements work together so perfectly in Season 4, where I couldn't help but binge it all in almost one sitting because I was so engaged with all of the fun, intense drama that goes on just in these first 5 episodes. You've gotta love the fact that the story is now set in London and Joe kind of becomes a Sherlock Holmes type character, forcing himself to get close to all these annoying rich people and try his best to figure out if potentially one of them is the culprit, the one that's stalking him. Much like Joe, I was trying my hardest to pick up on any potential clues or things they said to one another that might sound shady, or the things that they said behind people's back, because these characters are pretty terrible people, and that added a lot more layers to my enjoyment just because I love the murder mystery genre as a whole, and watching a murder mystery through the eyes of Joe Goldberg I think is also just an excellent idea. Speaking of Joe, or Jonathan as he's going by his new identity, Penn Badgley is the best part of You. Every single season he continues to evolve as the character and be so captivating, making this show so much fun to watch with his charisma, his great wit, and even more amazing inner monologue. Not only just because he hates these rich people that he's forced to be around, so he's continuously roasting them every single episode, but he is not a big fan of being the prey in this scenario. So it really reflects in his inner monologues because he is continuously on guard, even in his head, on trying to outsmart this person that potentially might know all of his secrets and could reveal them to the world. Not only that, but from time to time, we do see the old Joe Goldberg slip out with some of the things that we see him do over the course of these 5 episodes. So he is trying to hide some certain things from people, and it's kind of difficult when you have no idea who potentially this person is that's stalking you. They could be watching you at all times, and we do see that reflected in some of the interactions that he gets through this messaging app. Because of all this though, I actually think Joe has a pretty good arc in Part 1 of Season 5. Part of it I think is due to the fact that he is forced to be on guard at all times, but also I think a lot of that is thanks to this new character introduced, Kate, played brilliantly by Charlotte Ritchie. The majority of the people in this circle of rich socialites, they really aren't that great. They're pretty bland, shallow, have no depth, lack all empathy, so you're not really supposed to like them or care about them, which kind of sucks because they get a lot of screen time and even have some storyline stuff that I'm not a big fan of. But Kate, on the other hand, I think is a pretty interesting character. Very well layered, complex. Many of her interactions with Joe are some of the season's most interesting character moments, along with a couple other characters that really don't get as much screen time. Like one of Joe's students has a few lines here and there that I think are pretty great. And also this other character, Reese, who we see sporadically over the course of the 5 episodes, but I think every character is probably going to get a bit more screen time because this is only Part 1 of an entire season. Not gonna lie, as much as I digged part 1 of season 4. I was a little bit disappointed how we pushed out a lot of the narrative that carried over from the end of season 3. Obviously, the main part of that is the stuff involving Marion. It makes sense in the context of the story, but it feels like they just wanted to go in another direction completely with You season 4. So they kind of brush her stuff to the side very early on, and we don't really revisit it yet, but it is part 1 after all. Maybe they'll revisit it in part 2. It's not a major gripe, it's just disappointing because Tati Gabrielle was so great in season 3, and she's not given a whole lot to work with so far. As much as I usually hate when a show is broken up into various different parts, I think it's set up perfectly at the tail end of part 1 of season 4. Both episodes 4 and 5, with Joe being forced to spend time in this countryside home with everyone, sets up some extremely tense situations. That, coupled with the fact that we have this great big reveal at the tail end, it sets up part 2 for some really exciting stuff. And thankfully, we don't have to wait too long. It's only a 1-month gap. It could be a whole lot worse. Okay, so we've reached the spoiler talk section of the video, so that is your warning that if you don't want to know any spoilers, if you're watching this before you've watched the episodes, that is your warning. So let's talk a little bit of the spoilers for season 4 part 1. Alright, so let's start with the stuff involving Joe and Marianne, since that's wrapped up pretty quickly towards the very beginning. Was kind of disappointed by it. I figured going in it wasn't going to be a very big prevalent part to the season just based on the promotional material, but even still, I feel like they just tried their hardest to wash their hands of the Marianne stuff to get to the murder mystery and this whole other plot, because it doesn't really go anywhere unexpected, but it just seems like we kind of just rush her out of the story. We don't kill her, of course, but Joe Goldberg kind of has a change of heart about that, which could kind of end up biting him in the ass, as now she knows that he's alive, and that is kind of like a big dangling thing in the back of his head, I imagine. It's weird because at first it seems like Joe wants to prove himself so he can get Marianne back eventually, but then he starts hooking up with Kate after Malcolm dies in the story, so we kind of just don't think about Marianne at all once the stuff starts rolling in this news story. I do like so far the relationship between Joe and Kate. It's built up very naturally as the story progresses. They of course don't get along for a large stretch of it, and even by the tail end of part 1, they're still kind of at odds with one another because they've kind of went through some pretty traumatic stuff like hiding bodies, like Gemma dies, and you have Joe walk in and find her with the dead body holding a knife. Gotta love Joe, man. Joe knows how to pick some women, doesn't he? Between Love and now Kate. You've got to give some credit to the writers of this show for trying their hardest to make sense of the fact that Joe is getting away with this new identity in London. He looks basically the exact same. He just has a beard and his hair's a little bit longer, but yet nobody recognizes him. Even though he was married to Love, who comes from a very rich family, I don't know. There's suspension of disbelief, but I figured somebody would have recognized him by now. He even tries his best to avoid being photographed or videotaped. It's not really a big deal or anything. I just think it's kind of funny that only a couple people recognized him, and that is the Eat the Rich killer and this private investigator that's hired by Love's family that gives him this new identity as Jonathan Moore. Speaking of the Eat the Rich killer drama, I thought it was very well executed. I was on the edge of my seat every single time he was toying with Joe. You know, he went into his apartment and plastered all those photos about his life and all these articles, which are things I figured that these people in the show would have known about, but I guess they don't check that kind of thing. It added such a fun new dynamic to the show, having him toy with Joe and killing off these rich socialites one by one and keeping Joe guessing on the identity of who the Eat the Rich killer could be. Because every single episode, I was kind of thinking it could be one person, then they would die. Even before we kick off the drama, it was so engaging with Joe getting so drunk on absinthe, he wakes up the next day and Malcolm is just murdered on his kitchen table, and then you have to dismember his body set to Cardi B, which that's going to be instantly iconic. I know that's going to be posted all over social media because of that. When it comes to the identity for the Eat the Rich killer, as the episodes went on and the suspect list got lower and lower, it didn't feel that much of a big reveal. When it was revealed it was Reese, because the interactions they had early on, it very much felt like to me like Reese and Joe kind of connected on a level that he would never connect with anyone else in the series, just because they have such tragic backstories. There were a few red herrings along the way as suspects. At certain points in time, I thought maybe potentially it was Joe's student, just because it seemed like they were getting kind of close at certain points. Then the other wild card one, the one way out of left field craziness, maybe even Love. Maybe Love actually survived, and that's the one that's torturing him through text message. I think the biggest one most definitely was Kate, but Kate seemed like too obvious of a choice to be the killer, just because you had that reveal at the tail end when when Joe walks in with Gemma on the ground and Kate's there to make it look like she murdered her. The killer being Reese, though, I think is a great twist. He seems like a pretty great foil for Joe, just because in the scenes that we do see them interact with one another early on and then after the reveal, they seem very similar, and I think that could work pretty well in kind of like a Joker-Batman kind of style relationship. Now that they know each other's secrets, that's what has me so excited to go into part 2, as it is going to be a face-off between Joe and Reese, and the fact that Reese is kind of trying his best to put himself in a position of political power. He's running for mayor of London. I didn't even know that they had a mayor of London, but hey, that's cool, I guess. But I am very excited to see where we go with the story and that battle, if you will, between them. The battle of the wits in part 2. But yeah, part 1 of You Season 4 is another thrilling first half to a potentially great season. The series continues to find so many different ways to keep you on your toes, which is exactly what you want from a story like this with a murder mystery dynamic involved. It's going to be very exciting to see where we go with part 2. As much as I hate part 1s and part 2s, like I said, it's only a month wait, so it's going to be fun to speculate within that month on all the different details leading into it. So make sure you share your thoughts down below once you've had a chance to check out part 1. What'd you think of part 1? Did you like it? Did you not like it? If you have any thoughts or predictions on where we're going to go with the story in part 2, make sure you share those down below as well. Also, did you guess correctly who the Eat the Rich killer was? The person that was stalking Joe this entire time? Anyways, share all your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for chatting the videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure to like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so there's updated reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. Next time, see you guys later.